Today, I am looking forward to today's video. Today's video, I want to have a look at, is there anything relevant in a story written about Cain and Abel? We've all heard the story of Cain and Abel. How do we make it relevant to us today? How do we find out what God is telling us here in this century? So we're going to use this story to learn a technique of finding out why. First thing I want you to try and do is have a look at what tools are you going to use. The one tool we're going to use today is a Bible translation. Most Bible translations are fantastic. In fact, it's actually good to use more than one Bible's translation. I am going to be reading from the English Standard Version today. The few translations you can avoid, we will discuss later down. There's a link in the description on translations, which are bad translations, which are okay, and which are good. Most translations are good. Next thing we've got to do is we've got to read the story. But now I don't want you to read it as blah, 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 blah. The story must come alive. If necessary, read it more than once so that you can start understanding what is happening there. Try and put a little bit of emphasis into reading. Read the story aloud. I want you to imagine that sitting around you, you're at a campfire and you are telling the story to people around the campfire. Make it that kind of thing. Some people are better storytellers than others. If people are listening to you, do the best you can. If you're on your own, still read aloud and put expression in. I'm going to be reading from Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Genesis, this is the book where all the things began. The universe began, mankind began, the Israelite nation began. Everything that began is described in Genesis. All our major doctrines are described in this book. But we're going to look at one story. I deliberately chose a story that's not usually used. Genesis chapter 4, reading from verse 1. Now Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have produced a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of the time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not also be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door to devour you. His desire is for you, but you must rule over it. You must rule over the sin. Cain then goes and speaks to his brother. And when they were in the field, Cain rises up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? He said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me away today from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, Enoch. When he built a city, he named the city after his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered. When you are reading and you come across these difficult to pronounce words, slur them. Nobody else can pronounce them anyway. Nobody's going to say you were wrong. And Methuselah fathered Lamech. Lamech took two wives. The name of one was Adah, the name of the other was Zillah. Adah bore Jabal, and Zillah bore Jabal Cain. Lamech then went on to murder somebody, saying that God's mark was on Cain, but if somebody harms me, I will kill 7 times. He will evict 7 times the justice. Okay, so what is the story saying to the original audience? What did those people sitting around the campfire, listening to Moses tell the story, how did they understand it? This is the next step in the process, because this was told to people thousands of years ago. We don't always fully understand, so this is a chance for you to ask questions of the story. Certain questions you should not ask. Why should you not ask them? Because we do not know the answer. And too many people, when they don't know the answer, will make up an answer rather than admit they don't know. So if you ask, is this history? Is this a myth? Is this a parable? I don't know. I wasn't there at the time. I just feel that old sometimes. But I was not there the day of Cain. And whichever type of story it is, history or myth, doesn't change what God is saying to us. I believe that it's based on history, but it doesn't matter at this stage to hear God. Another question people like asking, why did God reject Cain's sacrifice? And I've heard so many erudite examples as to why. People have gone to academic research as to why God rejected Cain. The rabbis have come up with reasons, but the fact of the matter is the Bible does not tell us. Ignore it. If the Bible doesn't tell us, you don't need to know. People come to you, especially these atheists who are trying to be clever, and say, okay, where did Cain's wife come from? Once again, the Bible doesn't tell us. We don't need to know. If you try and answer that, you trip yourself up and you are not going to get any further in the argument. That doesn't mean you can't try and imagine how Cain felt when he was rejected. You can try and imagine the atmosphere. You can try and imagine what was going on in the background. You can try and imagine how, but don't base any doctrine on that. Don't base any teaching on that. Just use that to help understand the story, to be able to tell the story better. Here are some good questions that we could ask. What was the general atmosphere in the first 3 verses of the story? The first 3 verses of the story, boys were born, boys to women who hadn't had children before. This was exciting. This was what on earth is happening? How about this? Did God curse Adam? I always thought he did, but read what the Bible says here. And he says, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground. It was his action that cursed him. God did not curse Cain. Have a look in verse 12 and verse 14. Cain is described as a wanderer, as somebody who's going to wander. In verse 14, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer. What was the first thing Cain did in verse 17? He built a city. God has made him to become a wanderer. He builds a city. Okay, these are some of the questions. You can probably think of more questions, and it would be right to think of questions. And if you don't know the answer, this is what it means by meditating on the Word. The Word is not designed to be easy. The Word is designed to teach. As you think over the story, meditate on the story, consider the story, read up on some of the other resources I'm going to give you later on. You will be enriched again and again. So, what eternal truths can we find in the story? This is step number 4. We need to have a look in the story. What truths are in here that are eternal? Abel kept flocks, Cain worked the soil. They had different tasks, different jobs. Your job might be different to mine. We've got different jobs. It is not that makes us good or bad. If you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. This is an eternal truth. You can read this 3 or 4 times during the week. Meditate on this. Sin is crouching at the door. It will devour you unless you rule over it. There is so much in this that you can learn, develop. I'm not going to do that now. This is teaching you the steps on how to get more out of your Bible. The last one I've given you is the example about the restless wanderer builds a city. What is God telling you to do? Not what God's telling the pastor to do, not what God's telling the evangelist to do. What is God telling you to do? Step 5. Now that you've worked out these eternal truths, anything that you decide based on those truths is going to be what God is saying to you. Now, God might not speak through all of those at the same time, but he will be speaking through some of them. Concentrate on them, meditate on them, think on them, until you find out what God is saying to you. Cain's sin was not working the soil? Obviously, because we work the soil. It's not a sin to be a farmer. We know that God was doing something wrong. God said, if you do not do what's right, won't you be accepted? So Cain knew what he was doing wrong. You probably know what you're doing wrong too. What is it you're doing that is not right? Something that you're doing in your life that's not right. Ask God to highlight that. Are you flirting at work where you should not be flirting? Are you harboring unforgiveness? If you are flirting where you should not be flirting, realize sin is crouching at the door, waiting to devour you. Rule over that sin. Okay, conclusion. God has marvelous stories. We're going to look at the mystery of Melchizedek next week. That is something that blows my mind every time. This time we focused on what questions to ask. Next story, we're going to use a commentary to find out how we can use that to study the Bible. Last thing, as we always say, please subscribe, please click like if this has benefited you. If you haven't, move on. God bless you, God keep you, God make his face to shine on you and give you peace.